Good morning, students. Yesterday we had seen how unpopular the decision of British government to drag India into the First World War had been, because there was widespread resentment owing to the fact that the Indians were not consulted by the British before being taken into the theater of Europe, and whereby we lost a lot of men, and of course there was a huge economic drain on, because the whatever money or that whatever taxes Indians were paying, that was intended to be used for their own welfare and benefit, but instead of that, everything was now being siphoned off to Europe so that British could fight the war there. So naturally, this was a very unpopular decision. So coming to today, the topic of the idea of Satyagraha. Mahatma Gandhi returned to India in January 1915. As you know, he had come from South Africa, where he had successfully fought the racist regime with a novel method of mass agitation, which he called Satyagraha. Now, students, you have to understand that South Africa at that point in time was also ruled by the whites. The local inhabitants of South Africa, that is, the black people in South Africa, did not have any say in it. So, in South Africa, it was again the British who exercised enormous amount of influence in the government, along with the Dutch, of course. Okay, because Dutch also had been a very influential power in South Africa through their history. So Gandhi had been there. Now you have there's one very interesting thing about Mahatma Gandhi there. Mahatma Gandhi had studied in England, and he went because and he was trained as a lawyer. Now he went to South Africa only to fight a case. Okay, that was around 1890, 92, 93. Yes, it was 1893. Uh, he went there just to fight one case. Okay, but instead of that, because South Africa even at that point in time had a huge Indian population, and Asian population also, that is, and the conditions of South African Asians and blacks was as bad as it was in India, because the same system of colonialism was prevalent in South Africa and practiced in South Africa, and the same thing was being done in India. So there was an enormous amount of similarity in the social condition and the political condition between South Africa and India. And Mahatma Gandhi, again, the conditions that he found there, he started protesting it, and again in a non-violent fashion, and he started galvanizing the people of Indian race and the blacks, of course, to fight against the British government and to throw away the system of discrimination which was based on the color of skin. Now, so Mahatma Gandhi returned to India, so a country where he had gone only to fight one case. Uh, Amazingly, he went on to spend more than 20 years in South Africa. Okay, and he got a chance to return to India in 1915 because he felt that the conditions of both the societies were same, but it was India that was the jewel in the British crown, or rather the jewel of the British crown, and he felt that his motherland needed him more, and if the British government uh, in India could be neutralized, or the British could be kicked out of India, the British would never be able to hold their other colonies in place, because India happened to be a huge contributor of resources to the British Empire. So, after spending around 20 years, Mahatma Gandhi returned to India, and he started his system and his act of Satyagraha. Now, in simple terms, what does Satyagraha mean? The Satya, as it means truth, right? It is not very difficult to understand that, yes, meaning of Satya is truth, and Satyagraha, it essentially implies holding on to the truth, whatever may come. Okay, ultimately, you hold to the truth against all odds, and whatever the condition is, one day there you have a firm belief that truth will prevail. And that is, it was not that Gandhi had invented it on his own and no one had done it before him. On the contrary, uh, Indian civilization, Indian history had always been about this. Ultimately, the truth will prevail, and the good would prevail, and the evil would be defeated ultimately. And our whole Ramayana and Mahabharata and all these great works uh, reflect as the belief of the society, even thousands of years ago, where people stuck to the righteousness, the path of morality, the path of ethics, the path of truth, whereby they always felt that truth would prevail. Ultimately, good would vanquish the evil, and this is the same thing which Mahatma Gandhi. This was the same thought that Mahatma Gandhi brought to India, but no one would have imagined that he would use this as a weapon against the British and would galvanize the whole country behind him, behind this political thought that yes, there was no need to fight British with arms and guns and bullets, something that Indians had been trying to do for a very long time, since 1757. But there was a whole change in strategy, that he felt that Satyagraha was enough. If you are on the path of righteousness, if you are on the path of truth, no opponent can withstand that indefinitely. There would be a time when the opponent would have to uh, surrender or accept defeat. And this is what Mahatma Gandhi brought this idea of Satyagraha to India. Let's come to this line. This could be done by, yes, without seeking vengeance. That is, the main tenet was of Satyagraha was, you were not there to seek vengeance. You were not there with a vindictive sense of action that, yes, I have to take revenge, and you have to be you have to ensure that the other one pays the price or something like that. No, he just felt that you just have to be on the path of righteousness. Everything else would itself be taken care of. The oppressor uh, would himself leave the platform. So, this could be done by appealing to the conscience of the oppressor. People, including the oppressors, had to be persuaded to see the truth, and instead of being forced to accept truth through the use of violence. By this struggle, truth was bound to ultimately triumph. Mahatma Gandhi believed that this dharma of non-violence would unite all Indians. Now, Gandhi was very right in making that assumption that Indians, by and large, we've always been non-violent. We have always used dialogue and negotiation and conversation as a means to find out problems to the solutions to I'm sorry the solutions to the problems, irrespective of the fact that however uh, dire that problem is, our first option or our first response is never going into the confrontation mode with arms and guns and swords and spears. Even today, whenever there is a problem or there might be a problem, as you know, all of you, we first start, we try and resolve it through conversation. You start saying, भाई साहब ऐसा नहीं है, ऐसा था, चलिए चलिए भाई साहब आप तो समझदारी दिखाइए, and those kind of things, which is there uh, even today. That is something which we practice even today, but it is not that it is a recent phenomena. It was always there. It was always a part of our culture. It was always a part of our civilization. Now you students are watching. Some of you definitely are watching Mahabharat, and you would see there that before the whole Mahabharat war started, Shri Krishna makes his best effort to ensure that there is some kind of a compromise that is reached between the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and they do not have to go to the battleground to resolve that issue. So, in spite of the fact that the Pandavas would have won the war, but Sri Krishna still makes an earnest attempt to try and pacify everyone, to try and reason it out with everyone. Though he failed, that is another matter. But the point which Mahatma Gandhi was trying to tell to, and he believed very fervently, that was that if you stick to the path of Satyagraha, if you stick to the path of righteousness, there is no reason why the opponent would be able to win against you. And so, after arriving in India, uh, Mahatma Gandhi successfully organized the Satyagraha movements in various places. In 1917, he traveled to Champaran in Bihar to inspire the peasants to struggle against the oppressive plantation system. Now, in Champaran, there was a whole indigo movement, which the farmers, they had been oppressed by the Britishers, and rather oppressed in the fashion that the farmers were being compelled to grow indigo against their own wish. Farmers wanted to grow their own respective crops, but the British had compelled them to grow indigo. And the problem with indigo cultivation is, students, unlike the other crops, is indigo really consumes a huge amount of nutrition from the soil where it is grown, where it is cultivated. And this is what had happened there, where in huge areas of northern Bihar, the lands had been laid infertile and barren, and nothing had, because they had been growing indigo for a long time, and was nothing, no other crop was growing, and there was a widespread famine. And that is why Mahatma Gandhi went to Champaran and Bihar to inspire the peasants against the struggle, and rather to struggle against the British. Then in 1917, he organized a satyagraha to support the peasants of Kheda district of Gujarat. uh, since in certain areas and certain literatures, you would also see that instead of 1917 Kheda, they also write 1918. The Kheda Satyagraha actually happened in 1918, so it's okay. Affected by crop failure and a plague epidemic, the peasants of Kheda could not pay the revenue. Firstly, there was a crop failure and the plague epidemic. Now, plague is usually caused by rats, but usually in the areas where there is a hygiene problem, where there is a huge amount of um, uncleanliness, and the germs actually get growth, and the rats come up and plague it in those years. Plague used to be quite prevalent in different parts of the world, the areas which used to be very poor, inhabited by poor people, and there was no hygiene, there was no cleanliness. And so the same thing had happened here in Kheda. And in 1918, Mahatma Gandhi went to Ahmedabad to organize a satyagraha movement amongst cotton mill workers. So what we see here is, after returning from South Africa, he started implementing his tactics and his learnings and his gains that he had made in South Africa against the Britishers, how he had galvanized the people of Asian origin, the black people of South Africa as well, to fight against the British. So he started using those techniques and whatever, the strategies that he had learned, how to galvanize people, and and ultimately really causing enormous amount of difficulty for the British to because the British could never figure it out, because Mahatma Gandhi was not with guns and bullets or spears and arrow that you can just take care of him by just firing a bullet. Now, a guy who is just moving around, just trying to be peaceful, just ensuring that the people have a voice, that ensuring that the people collect and raise their voice, and just following the path of righteousness, it was extremely problematic for the British now to figure it out how to deal with this guy, and also how to deal with the situation. Okay, bye.